All righty. I think I'm live. Am I live? Let me know in the chat if I am live. I see Jojo in the chat. Can you see me, Jojo? Am I live? Did we do this right? I'm not used to doing lives, you guys. Usually I edit and pre-film. So this is all very, very new. But hopefully, in the effort of, hold on one second, you guys, in the effort of trying to combat what's going on YouTube with the shadow banning. Sorry, my ADD is kicking in. With shadow banning, we're hoping that by doing some lives that will help us with this little problem that we have here on the YouTube. So we'll see how this goes. And so I thought Monday Mysteries would be a good way to do this because these are kind of, Monday Mysteries, they're supposed to, as we used to do a lot of Monday Mysteries. And so I kind of stopped for a while because of all the research stuff going on with the AIs, and there's just been this whole drama with those of us that do research, which I've spoken about so many times on shows before. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse by talking about it again, but we're going to go back to doing Monday Mysteries because I think Monday Mysteries are fun. I enjoy these stories, some of these unsolved stories. I think that they are entertaining. I also think it allows us an opportunity to critically think, and sometimes around stories that really don't affect us personally, but allow our minds to kind of exercise themselves and all that good stuff. So we're going to go back to doing this. Hopefully we'll continue to do them as lives. Here's a question that I have for you guys, though. Now, I'm the only one here right now. I don't have my moderators. My boyfriend right now is washing our dog. Our dog's getting a bath, and that is very dramatic for Ravi, so he cannot moderate right now. So, but you guys know, let me know what time, if you guys want to participate in the lives, or if you're part of the replay crew, what time do you guys want to do these if we do them live? Now, I can't do evenings as it stands right now because of our schedule, but if like noon is better or 1 p.m. is better, let me know. Let me know in the comment section below so that I can better schedule these so we can discuss these together. And we're starting with an interesting one. Now, before we get into it, I just noticed that I am using the YouTube Studio to go live. Now, if you don't have a YouTube channel, this might all sound like Chinese to you, but I'm going to explain anyway before we get into it, because to go live, I'm on YouTube's platform right now going live. Most people go live through StreamYard. StreamYard is a lot easier to work than YouTube's platform. However, I've looked at StreamYard. StreamYard is extremely expensive. And so right now, budgeting wise, it doesn't seem like that would be a priority for me on Esoteric Atlanta because we don't make any money on this channel. And so to spend that, I mean, it is ridiculous how expensive StreamYard is. So with that being said, when we do these lives, I just noticed I do have a share screen here on YouTube. So I was worried about that. I can share screen with you guys to show you some of these websites, all that kind of stuff about the story that we're going to talk about today. But for anybody that's watching, if this is kind of janky, the studio we're on right now, but if you guys know of an alternative to StreamYard, alternative software to live streaming that's not, doesn't cost you a mortgage payment to pay for it each month, then let me know in the comment section below too, so that we can make this all the better for you. I also want to remind you guys before we get started that Todd has just opened up a channel called The Confused Wanderer, and he is going to be covering a lot of the Law of One stuff and a lot of the Cassiopean drama that's going on. He is way more versed in this than I am. A lot of you guys got to know about the Law of One and the Cassiopeians through my channel. But again, he's been doing this for a long time. So if you go and subscribe to The Confused Wanderer, you'll get all that information about the Law of One and the Cassiopeians. Also, we will be using his channel as a backup for my channel. In case anything happens to my channel, we can put some of my stuff over on his channel as well. All right. Again, before we get into it, if you want to subscribe over on my Substack, I did open up a Substack, and that allows me to email you every time a video drops or every time we have a live coming up because of the shadow banning that we deal with on this channel. This is just another way for me to keep in contact with you guys. So if you want to, that should be down in the description box below. Just subscribe to it so I can send you notifications. I can do YouTube's job for YouTube and send you notifications. All right, with that being said, I think we should just get into it. I have some exciting news that I'm going to wait to share at the end of this episode. Kind of exciting news, but this news does kind of affect the channel for this week. But I'll wait till we get to the end of the episode just in case we have new people here who are just interested in the story and they don't know the inner workings of our community here. So I'll hold on that until the end. So let's go ahead and get into Stephen Kubacki. This is a very fascinating case. And you guys, it's not a mystery anymore. I know I advertised it as Monday Mystery because it was one of America's biggest mysteries for many, many, many generations. But finally, Stephen Kubacki himself finally admitted to what actually happened to him back in 1978. So, and it's interesting because sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. And the story of Stephen Kubacki, as I was researching for this episode today, that's how I found out that they had actually solved this mystery. I kept getting the whole best laid plans of mice and men, which comes from a poem written by Robert Burns. And then, of course, most of us had to read the American novel of Mice and Men, which is based off of the poem. The best laid plans of mice and men is one of the famous lines from that poem. And that's just kind of the line that was going in my head, like bouncing around in my head as I was listening to Stephen Kubacki actually admit to what happened for those 15 months that he had mysteriously disappeared back in 1978. So let's go ahead and talk about the story, like what happened before we actually get to the conclusion. And I think this is really interesting because, as I just said, nothing is stranger. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. I think it was Mark Twain that said that. And when you hear about what actually happened, it is a little a little kind of comical a bit at what actually happened, the best laid plans of mice and men, right? And I think sometimes this also teaches us a lesson, and this is a lesson that I personally have had to learn. I think a lot of you guys have had to learn. We're living in very strange times right now, that there's no secret. Like, no matter what aisle of the political perspective you land on, things are just really weird right now in our world. And I think sometimes what happens is we jump to these conclusions that there is a grand conspiracy behind a lot of things. And sometimes that's not true. Now, there is a little bit of a conspiracy behind this coming from Stephen's own words. But when we get into some of the theories of what happened to him and then look at what actually happened to him, I hope it serves as a lesson that we also always need to look at Occam's razor, which is basically the most likely scenario is what happens. That's Occam's razor. And that's kind of what this is. This story has dumbfounded people for so long. It was covered on Ancient Aliens because people thought that he had fallen through a portal, that he was abducted by aliens. I mean, there's so much about this story that lends to these like more paranormal, metaphysical experiences and conspiracies. And really, that's not at all what happened. And so let's go ahead and get into it. I see we have somebody, and I'm sorry, you guys, I am the only one. As I said earlier, I don't have any of my moderators, so forgive me if I miss comments. So this is why I don't do lives a lot, because I would rather just sit here and chat with you guys, but then I would never tell you guys the story. And so it helps when you have a moderator to help you stay on task. But we're gonna do our best today, and we're gonna get into Stephen Kubacki. So yes, we have some Michigan people here. We are gonna be. This is gonna open us up to some other stories that are weird from Michigan. Every state has weird stories. Every state has conspiracies and crazy things going on. And the Michigan Triangle does play into this story, or into one of the theories behind the story. And we are going to be talking about a little bit about the Michigan Triangle today. And we also are going to do shows on the Michigan Triangle coming up. So for any of my people from Michigan, I know I've got a lot of you. Any of my people from Michigan, I would love to hear from you. Leave some comments, some stories that you know of, stories you want me to comment, research and do shows on, or if there's any anecdotes that you want to share, please feel free, because this is weird. Like there is some very strange stuff going on in this area. For those that don't know, the Great Lakes here in the United States, it's weird to me because I've always grown up near a coast. My family's very coastal. And what's crazy to me about, my perspective of lakes is they're small. My dad did have a lake house growing up. They're small. You can see across the lake to the other house, right? But these Great Lakes up near Michigan, they look like an ocean. Like when you stand on the shore, it mimics that of an ocean because the lakes are so big. Now, with that being said, too, I know that other people have covered the Great Lakes. There's a lot of conspiracies around like how they were formed, where they came from, where are they natural? There's all these different sorry, you guys might hear Robbie barking. He's, as I said earlier, he is getting a bath right now and he does not like getting baths. So I apologize if you guys hear him barking. So let's get into it because this takes place around the Lake Michigan area. In fact, the disappearance happened on Lake Michigan. And I would love to again hear from my Michigan people or anybody from a colder climate because down here in the South, like we don't really do winter down here in the South. Like if they even speculate that it might snow down here, everybody thinks Jesus is coming back and it's the apocalypse and everything shuts down. Like the Piggly Wiggly sells out of bread and water. So none of us down here really understand winter. If you ask somebody from the South what when you say skiing to somebody from the South, typically what first comes to their mind is water skiing. Water skiing. We grew up water skiing. But if you ask somebody from the north about skiing, they might say snow skiing. So it just kind of gives you culturally where we're from. There's a lot of information there. And so when we get into his disappearance, it was in the winter and it was on Lake Michigan. For my Michigan people or anybody from the north or our colder climate, let us know more information about this because this is wild to me. Our lakes don't freeze down here. Like we don't ice skate down here. We rollerblade, right? Like we don't have that down here. So let's get into it. So, what is this story? So, again, this story takes place in around Holland, Michigan. Now, I love history. You guys know that. I could literally spend all day researching these peculiar little towns. We all have them. We have a town down here in Georgia called Helen, Georgia, that's really German. And so there's a couple of these towns we see throughout the United States that are really built to kind of venerate where a lot of the locals came from. So Holland, Michigan got its name from like Dutch Calvinist that came into the area at a particular time in our American history. This isn't really a show about that, but this is just kind of some interesting information about the area where this happened. So Holland, there actually recently was a movie that came out with Nicole Kidman based, I think it was called Holland, and it took place in Holland, Michigan. We tried to watch it, but we kind of, oh, good, we have a moderator. Awesome. Midwest Night Watchers, you guys, they're in the chat. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And please make sure to subscribe to Midwest Night Watchers because they talk about these lakes. And I know we've kind of briefly mentioned them, but so make sure you're subscribed to their channel as well. So Holland, again, it was settled by, well, not really settled, it was kind of taken over by Dutch Calvinists. And they literally mimicked the town like Holland. So they have windmills, they have tulip fields. It's wild seeing the pictures. And so this is where there's a college, a university in Holland called Hope College. And this is where Stephen Kubacki was enrolled when he went missing. Now let's talk a little bit about Stephen Kubacki. I've got my notes here. I might have to look at my notes, but from what I've seen of Stephen Kubacki, and this is important to the story. Stephen Kubacki is from the New England area, and he grew up in like a lower middle class family, like a really like a blue collar, like a working family. But he himself, from what I've seen from his interviews, what I've read, was highly intelligent. And so he ended up getting into an academy called Deerfield Academy, which is a private school in, I believe, Massachusetts. Is that where he was from? I'm going to try to share a screen here so you guys can see. Is it going to let me? Here we go. If you guys can see that. This is a Deerfield Academy. And this kind of gave me, I kind of had a little bit of PTSD Academy because it reminded me of the school that I went to when I was a young child and called Darlington. It's also a private school. So this is a private, super, super wealthy And for my English people, private schools are schools that people pay for. They pay. It's not a government school. We call our government schools public schools, which I know in England they call public schools mean private schools. So this is like a really very swanky private school. And the thing about these schools too is that they it, am I still like okay, cool. Sorry guys, we are really YouTube Studio is a little fickle, so bear with me here. So the thing about these private schools is that they also are very academically challenging. I actually believe in my heart of heart that my school, and in my opinion, a lot of other schools like this can be very abusive with academics. For example, my biology book I had when I was like a freshman in high school, so at like 14 years old, was the same biology book that they were using in medical school. That's inappropriate. You should not be giving a 14-year-old kid a biology book that's used in medical school. A 14-year-old child's brain is not fully developed yet, and to understand these really complicated concepts in biology, that's for doctors, that's not appropriate. And like my school would, we had 8 classes a day, and they were required to give us 45 minutes to an hour worth of homework every night. So I would be up all night studying. Then the next day, we would have these tests and quizzes over what we learned, and then the subject would be taught. So there's a lot of trauma, I think, that happens in these private schools. I also think because they are private schools, a lot of their crimes are covered up. Not saying that public schools are any better with some of that stuff, but I do think you have a better shot in a government school of exposing like maybe some not so great teachers when it comes to I have to watch my words when it comes to like younger students and older teachers, that inappropriate relationships. There's a lot that's covered up in these schools. And justice is not served. And in my opinion, for like my private school specifically that I went to, I definitely believe there needs to be even though the government isn't that great, I do think there should be a federal investigation into Darlington. In my personal opinion, I think that school needs to be shut down. And I don't know much about Deerfield. Deerfield could be a great school, but just my experience of being in a school that's like Deerfield, I do think that there is a lot of trauma that happens to children there. Now, with this though, with Stephen's case, where we differ is that Stephen did not come from a rich family. So Stephen was very much in a very different situation than a lot of his classmates were. You know, he had to work. He had to go and do part-time jobs. And that might be common in like a government school, but that's not common in a private school. Like when I was a kid, none of my friends, none of us worked. None of us had jobs. Maybe we babysat on the weekends, but that it's just a very different environment. So Stephen, from what I can gather, I think a lot of his what ended up shaping him as we're going into his disappearance, I think he probably experienced a lot of stress, even though he was smart enough to be in a private school, even though he was smart enough to handle the academic pressures of and trust me, they are academically hard. These schools are, they're very different. You're taking, like I said, you're taking university level classes when you're a child at these schools. A lot of kids who go to these schools, when they do go into university, they can skip their first or second year and go straight because of what they took when they were at their private school. So there's a lot of backstory to this. And that just really, and other people who cover this story might not focus so much on that, but that really struck me as something very pivotal in Stephen's life. And then when we find out what actually happened, I think it does play part into his story and why things unfolded the way they unfolded in Holland. So Stephen ended up going off to this college, this Hope University, which is a private Christian university. It's near the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. Stephen was 23 years old. He was like in his final semester, and he was going to be majoring in history. He was going to walk away with a bachelor's in history, and he literally disappeared. So let's back up and talk about again Stephen. Stephen was an outdoors guy. Like he's from the New England area. So this guy, like, he understands winter sports. He was very, very proficient in winter sports. Like if I was up in Holland, Michigan, and I went missing, I probably like slipped in the river or the lake. Like I'm not proficient in And a few years ago, my one of my really good friends who lives up in Canada, we were on the phone and he was talking about how he had to go get his winter tires. And I was like, come again? Winter what? What do you mean winter tires? Like, what are you talking about? And he was like, yeah, winter tires. And I was like, don't you just use your tires? So I don't know much about, I didn't realize that people that live in an area where it gets snow actually have to change their tires like that. That never I never understood, I never knew that because I'm not from an area that gets snow. So again, for me, if I went missing in this area, there would really be no mystery as to what happened to me. I probably just, lost my life because I didn't know what I was doing. But Steven knew what he was doing. Steven, absolutely. He was very experienced as a cross country skier. And so he loved being outside. He loved this winter sports. And again, this happened in February of 1978. So we're in the dead of winter in Michigan. For my Michigan people, let us know in the comment section what winter is like, what February is like in Michigan, because I can't even imagine hearing these stories. So Stephen had an apartment off campus. He had a roommate, and he decided, let me get the dates here. On Saturday, February 18th of 1978, Stephen decided that he was going to take a 6-mile cross-country ski to the coast of Michigan from his apartment. 6 miles, that's like 10K. I've never done I've gone skiing before, but I've never done cross country skiing. I know that's kind of when they walk. So I don't know how long it would take you. It takes me about an hour to run a 10K. I don't know how long it would take somebody to cross country ski a 10K, a 6 mile, but so let me know in the comment section below. Now his roommate wasn't super concerned when Steven never came back because this guy, again, he is proficient in winter sports. Like he is the Mac Daddy when it comes to winter sports. And so he's not super concerned. Well, the next day, though, when Sunday comes around and Steven is still not back, that's when the roommate starts to get slightly concerned. So the roommate at that point decides to call the police. And this is tricky. And for my people who are not from the United States, every state is going to handle these situations differently. And again, this is back in 1978. I know there's Brandon's law now. There's a lot of different laws that have changed on how we handle missing people. But the big kicker is, and this is kind of true across the board, if you're over 18, you are a legal adult. And so as a legal adult, you have the right to disappear. And so a lot of times when these things happen, sometimes the cops will not react right away because adults have the right to disappear. And so that's kind of what they said to the roommate. They were like, he's over the age of 18. He probably went off. He's got the right to disappear. He's probably fine, especially since you tell us that he was proficient in winter sports. He's probably fine. So anyway, so then that brings us to Monday, February 20th. And this is when shit gets real for the police department because on Monday, the 20th of February, 1978, there were people who were in snowmobiles around this area that found a backpack and skis on the coast. They looked in the backpack to see who it was, and they saw the identification for Stephen Kubacki. So then they contacted the police, and the police knew that the roommate had already called them the day before, concerned about his roommate not coming home. So that's when the police were like, "Oh shit! Like this isn't good. This isn't good." So they get to the location of where the backpack and the skis have been left, and they saw that there were footprints that were about 200 yards into Lake Michigan. So on the ice. All right. And then all of a sudden, the footprints just vanish. They immediately contacted Stephen's parents. They flew in. Stephen's brother informed the police officers that Stephen would have never left his backpack sitting on the side of the coast. Like he would have taken his backpack with him. He would have never done that. So they call in the helicopters, they call in the Coast Guard, they call in the dogs, all these things to try to find. They're looking for a body at this point, right? Because this is the dead of winter. And I was watching something on like Lake Michigan to prepare for this and like how this works. And because Lake Michigan is so big, it almost looks like an ocean. There's something about when you have a little pond and it freezes over, apparently there's a different reaction when it ices over than a lake like Lake Michigan. And I'm not quite sure how this works again because I'm not from an area that really does winter. Like we don't that's kind of an urban legend down here in the South winter. So if you understand this a little bit better than me, then feel free to put it in the comments section. So apparently when a lake is that big and it has waves, even when it freezes over, waves can still like run under the ice. Again, I don't really know how that works because the ice is hard enough at this point for people like Steven to walk on it, to go across it, to do all these things. I'm sure they do ice water fishing. So I'm a little bit confused about how this works. Is it like a rolling earthquake almost? Not it's not an earthquake, but how it would feel. I lived in California for a while. I experienced these rolling earthquakes where the ground rolls. Would that be what it felt like when you were standing on ice? I don't know. And so, but this was kind of what the powers that be, the authorities thought had happened, that this rolling wave had like cracked the ice and somehow Stephen had fallen through the ice and unfortunately drowned. That is literally the only conclusion they could come to because he walks out. No, he vanishes. The footsteps are gone. Backpack and skis are left. He's nowhere to be seen. And I'm sure, I don't know because I've never been in a rescue mission, but I'm sure if in a winter situation like that, there's only so far they can look for a body because of the elements of nature. Now, as time goes by, they realize that there is no body. So I guess as things start to change, as implement weather starts to relieve a little bit, and they continue the search for any type of remains, there's none to be found. Like there's no, the only thing we have of Stephen Kubacki is his backpack and his skis. Ne'er a t-shirt was found, like ne'er a Snickers wrapper was found, like nothing else was found of this guy. And so the only thing the authorities know for sure is that he's missing. He's missing and there's the body didn't leave the lake. Like there's no signs that this person actually physically left the lake, but he's not there. So where the hell is he? So at this point, obviously, as one does, conspiracies start to arise. One of the conspiracies that was going around the town was that Stephen Kubacki had been a victim of, and I don't mean to laugh, but could you imagine if this was your brother or your son and you hear this theory that potentially a victim of John Wayne Gacy? Because he was doing his stuff at this thing. That would be terrifying. I would rather think that my loved one was abducted by aliens than being a victim of John Wayne Gacy. So, John Wayne Gacy, for those who are not familiar, is one of our very famous serial unalivers here in the United States. You can look up information on him if you want, but that was a theory. Also we had theories of, again, portals, a multiverse, abductions. There's the whole hollow earth theory, Agartha, that maybe he had fallen through a cavern. Like he didn't necessarily go through a portal, but he went through maybe a cavern that brought him into the underworld of Agartha. That theory was floating around. There was also theories that Stephen, because of his high intellect, had possibly been abducted by the United States government and was being used and held by the government for their three-letter agency conspiracies. Which to me, out of all of the theories that were going around, that one actually sounds the most likely. To be honest with you guys, I absolutely believe in the paranormal. I absolutely believe in a multiverse. I absolutely believe in portals. But again, Occam's razor. I think those situations are very few and far between. And so we have to look at Occam's razor, which is what's the most likely situation. Now, there were a few people that did suspect that Stephen was behind this himself. But those people were a very small percentage of people that actually believed Stephen had something to do with his own disappearance. Okay, well, on May 5th, 1979, so about 15 months after his disappearance, where ne'er a sighting of him had been seen, he wakes up in a field in Massachusetts near his aunt's house. Ta-da! He's just back. Here is a quote from Stephen Kubacki. I was lying on a grass in a meadow when I woke up. I didn't know where I was. I was wearing clothes that were not mine. So he claims all of a sudden, just like poof, he's in this meadow, which honestly, maybe that was the word they used more in the 70s. I don't know. I've never said a meadow. I've never called something a meadow before in my life. That sounds more like a fairy tale to me. Like, they talk about things in fairy tales, but nonetheless, he claims he was just like laying in the grass and he came to, and he's in Massachusetts and he's in clothes that he doesn't recognize. The last thing he remembers, or so he claims, is being on the ice. That's literally the last thing he remembers. But he goes from the meadow, he finds somebody. Now, again, this was 1979, so no cell phones, nothing like that. There were pay phones. He doesn't know where he is at first, but he finds somebody. He claims he didn't even know what the date was until he looked at a local newspaper to see the date. And he calls his aunt because he knows he's in the area where his aunt lives. So he goes to his aunt's house. His aunt calls his parents, and he seriously cannot remember what happened to him over these last 15 months. In his backpack, he had running shoes, he had a map of California, and a Marathon Wisconsin t-shirt. And he has no idea where these items came from. He said he felt like in his body, I exercise a lot, so you can kind of feel this, like maybe he had been running, like actually exercise, like running a lot, which that makes sense to me because I kind of felt that in his body, but he can't remember. Again, like I said, he claims the last memory he had was standing on the ice. He does not know where he was for these past 15 months. And so the story breaks all over the country, like this guy's back, but who knows what happened to him. Now, what was weird too, a lot of people were starting to notice that Stephen really didn't have any interest in like what happened to him. And I was kind of thinking about that. Like, if that happened to you, if you were gone for like a year, I think part of me at first would want to know what happened, but then I think over time you might not want to know because you might be afraid of what you learn. So I know people came down hard on Stephen for that, but in this time, I think I could kind of see, like, if he legitimately couldn't remember, maybe there was a part of him that was like, maybe I don't want to remember. But nonetheless, decades went by, and it's remained this huge mystery of like what happened to Stephen Kubacki. And Stephen Kubacki went on with his life. He finished his education. He became a psychiatrist. And it wasn't until recently that he actually spoke about it. And y'all, the best laid plans of mice and men. It is crazy. And it is Occam's razor. For those people who believed that Stephen was behind it, they were correct. They were absolutely correct. But before we get into that, I do want to read this article. Let's just read an article together on this. Let's see here. Let me find it here. Let's read. Is that it? Let's see here. Okay, here we go. We're going to read this article about Stephen Kubacki, the disappearance of Stephen Kubacki in the Lake Michigan Triangle. So again, this is by the Lake Michigan Triangle. That's why I brought it up. Now, I don't know if Stephen Kubacki knew anything about the Lake Michigan Triangle. Can I close this? We might just have to leave that ad up, guys. I don't want to click anything and have the stream get messed up. So it's not clear whether he knew about the Lake Michigan Triangle, but it just so happens that his disappearance happened in this area. And so that's what lended to a lot of the conspiracy theories. So Stephen Kubacki was a 23-year-old student at Hope College in Holland, Michigan, a private Christian university near the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, when he disappeared on February 20th, 1978, whilst on a solo cross-country skiing trip near the town of Saugatuck. I hope I'm saying that right. That's near Holland. The day after his trip to Lake Michigan, snowmobilers in Saugatuck spotted cross-country skis abandoned with a backpack and contacted the authorities to report a missing person. They quickly found that the pack's contacts belonged to Steve, and a search and rescue mission was immediately started. But the only clue was a 200-yard trail of footprints in the snow leading past the edge of the lake, which ended abruptly, leading investigators to conclude that Steve had fallen through the ice to his death, either by drowning or hypothermia. The area close to Lake Michigan was somewhere Steve had visited many times before. Then 15 months later, Kubacki reappeared in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, 720 miles due east, with no memory of what had happened since the day at Lake Michigan. Was Steve a victim of the Lake Michigan Triangle, the site of many disappearances of planes, boats, and people over the years? And I can tell you guys, no, he was not. He was not a victim of the Lake Michigan Triangle. And again, I don't know if Steve was aware of the Lake Michigan Triangle. I listened to some of his interviews and never came up, but it would be kind of clever if he was aware of it, because that might lend to his story, his mysterious story. So over these years, Steve finally has decided to spill the beans on what actually happened that day. Okay, the best laid plans of mice and men, my friends. So here's the story. And you can actually get Steve's book. I'm going to pull, let's see if I can pull that up for you guys. He has written a book about it. And I'm really curious to see what you guys think of this book. So let me just show you. I have a website here for Steve. He does have his own website. He has a PhD now. Let's see here. Sorry, guys. I'm sure this is going to get faster the more I do these lives, but this is his website. I'll pin it down in the comment section after we're done. The Disappearance, Conspiracy, Revolution, and Revelation. That is his book, Stephen Kubacki, PhD. All right. An extraordinary true story behind a global mystery. After 45 years of silence, all of a sudden, Stephen starts to speak. A Vanished Man, a 15-month mystery, the memoir that defines explanation and finally speaks. In 1978, Stephen Kubacki disappeared again without a trace near Lake Michigan. 15 months later, he reappeared. All right, so he has all of this here of what happened. Again, now, y'all want to hear what... I don't know if this pisses me off or if this is just kind of like, well, this is what young people do. So again, remember I told you about how he had been a student at Deerfield Academy before. That was his lower education before going off to Hope College. Deerfield, a very swanky prep school, a very swanky private school. He was a lower middle class, like working class guy. So he's around all these rich kids. So I do think, and again, maybe you'll understand why I think that this is an important part of the story. So Stephen decides when he's at Holland, Michigan, as he himself says, this is during the Vietnam War. We are a decade out from like the hippie revolution. All these things were a couple of years after Son of Sam, which you guys have seen me talk about a lot. A lot is going on. There's a lot of change of consciousness, we'll say, in the world. And Stephen does in some of these interviews talk about metaphysical things. He talks about like having ghost experiences. So he is very, even though he himself is highly educated and very academic, he's also kind of woo-woo as well. Like he believes in a multiverse, but that's not what happened to him. So when Stephen was at a Holland College, he met a group of friends who decided they were going to be revolutionaries. They even formed their own little group. Think about like extremely liberal, they wanted to join the French Foreign Legion. They really wanted to like shake humanity up. They wanted to destroy, from what I understand, from what I've seen, I have not read his book, like this capitalistic world. Like they wanted to like, which I think a lot of that with Stephen, if we're looking at him from a young person's perspective, I think growing up in Deerfield Academy and being the poor kid at Deerfield really affected him. I think he dealt with a lot, in my opinion. I could be wrong, just my opinion. I think he probably dealt with a lot of shame for being the poor kid with rich kids. And so I think he started to project that shame. It's interesting, he's a psychiatrist now, but I think he started to project that shame out. And he felt like instead of actually just working through his own shame, he felt like he had a call to like save the world from these rich people, from these capitalists. And I don't really understand, like, I kind of get the point of this. So he planned to disappear. He had these group of people. I can't remember. They had a name for themselves. It's in his book, their little group, and they planned this out to a T. that he was going to disappear on this particular day. I don't know how they got it where his footsteps were not seen leaving, but he set his backpack, his skis up, made imprints in the snow, and then was picked up by a getaway car. All right, I kid you not, you guys. Like sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. Now, according to one of the interviews I saw, he went down to Mexico. He had a different identity, which obviously in the 1970s was way harder. I mean, way easier to do than it is now. Like now, I think this would be almost impossible to do. It still happens, but be very hard to do. And he was going to go underground, basically. Now, when they say going underground, I don't think they mean going underground in the sense they're going to Agartha, right? They're literally just going to go and like join these other, like the French Foreign Legion, like these other groups of freedom fighters, which yeah, think Antifa. I'm only going to say that one time, but you know what I'm talking about, that type of group that sometimes gets a little violent to get their way. So he was going to go and join these groups and make a point to disappear and take on a new identity and really go for it and help with these other people that were with his group at Hope College. They're the only ones who knew what happened to him. They're going to keep it a secret, and they're going to arrange through these underground organized freedom fighter legions. They're going to arrange to like revolutionize the world, right? Again, the best laid plans of mice and men. And then about 15 months after this happened, he realized that things are easier said than done. And he also talks about how he wasn't super comfortable with violence. And a lot of these freedom fighting groups are big in violence. Again, think of the A group that I just mentioned here in the United States, for example, right? They want freedom, but they're going to violently force you to take freedom their way. Yeah. Again, these are young kids. He was 23. His brain wasn't fully developed yet. And so he wants to come back to his life. He wants to come back to being Stephen Kubacki. He don't want to do this anymore. He doesn't want to be an underground freedom fighter anymore. And so he decides to show up in Massachusetts near his aunt's house and just claim ignorance that he doesn't know what happened. And for all these years, he's kept his mouth shut. He's kept his mouth shut, and he finally decided to write a book about it. He's still, all of his cohorts, his friends at Hope College have never been named. They have never let themselves be known. In some of the interviews, people have asked him, and he is still in touch with a lot of these people, but he does not name them in the book. He gives them a pseudonym, a fake name. And he was like, they've kept my secret all these years. I'm going to keep their secret. I'm not going to out them. And I don't know what the legal ramifications would be. Let me know in the comment section. I'm sure the FBI would probably be involved because he did cross state lines. I mean, hell, he went to a totally different country. But I don't know if these kids would still be liable for any legal prosecution for doing what they did. I think Stephen also, from what I've listened to his interviews, I think he also has felt very guilty about the pain he caused his parents and his friends, his siblings, and about the amount of money that was used to try to find him with the helicopters, calling in the Coast Guard. That money is paid for. These rescues are paid for by tax dollars, by the people. So here he is, this young kid that's running off to go underground to fight for the people, but literally draining money from the people to look for the money spent searching. Steve, I think it's just taxpayers. Yeah, the taxpayers' money. They pay for the helicopters, the Coast Guard to come in and look for the body when there was no body to be found. That's why there was no body to be found. He was in Mexico. He was alive. And, as I'm listening to Steve do these interviews that I was listening to, I found myself getting kind of pissed off, like listening to him, like you son of a bitch. Like, obviously being around a bunch of spoiled rich kids really gravely affected you because of your shame, obviously, in my opinion, for being the poor kid. But here you are acting like a spoiled brat by running off and stressing people out and causing a lot of trauma. I mean, could you even imagine his roommate? I mean, the trauma his roommate must have felt. Even if his roommate wasn't a close friend of his, that's still traumatic, right? To like your roommate's gone and nobody knows where he is. That would be very traumatic. And so you acted like a spoiled brat, even though your whole revolutionary plan was to take down spoiled brats. Like, but again, the best laid plans of mice and men. Like, he was a kid, and I know from his interviews he sees the ridiculousness of his actions, and so that's why he's writing this book. That's why he has a website. I am kind of interested in reading his book just to getting a little bit more information from his perspective, because he is a psychiatrist. He works in mental health now, so he talks a lot about disassociation and the phenomenon of disassociation, which we all do. We all disassociate, and how that works with the mind. And so I would highly suggest listening to some of his interviews. Stephen Kubacki, just Google it, he'll pop up. But anyway, so yeah, it's a mystery that has now been solved. And again, it goes back to that Occam's razor. Sometimes the most likely situation is absolutely what happened. And I think it's just, in my opinion, a coincidence that this happened near the Michigan Triangle. Once again, I have not heard in any of the interviews Stephen Kubacki mention the Michigan Triangle. He might mention it in his book. I don't know. I haven't read his book. But it just so happens he was at school near this phenomenon of where this area is. Now, let me actually look here and let's see what I have pulled up for those who don't know. So let me read about the Michigan Triangle again, because we are going to go into some more cases involving the Michigan Triangle. The Michigan Triangle is a mysterious area in Lake Michigan that has been linked to a number of disappearances of ships, planes, and people, similar to the more famous Bermuda Triangle. It stretches roughly between Ludington, Michigan, Benton Harbor, Michigan, and Manitowoc, Wisconsin. I hope I'm saying that right, in Wisconsin, forming a triangle in the southern half of the lake. So the legend, the idea of the Michigan Triangle emerged in the early 20th century after several unexplained disappearances on Lake Michigan. The area became famous for mysterious navigational failures, missing vessels, and unexplained lights or time anomalies reported by sailors and pilots. And there is a list of notable disappearances. We probably are going to cover a few of them on this channel, because there literally are some stories around the Michigan Triangle that are totally unexplainable. Unfortunately, Stephen Kubacki is not one of them. His story is now explainable. He was not abducted by aliens. He did not go into a multiverse. He did not go into a portal. He was not part of a government secret conspiracy. He was not a victim of John Wayne Gacy. He was a victim of his own conspiracy. And so anyway, again, but this is a great opening for Lake Michigan and the Michigan Triangle for us to get into it with future cases. So I know I've gotten a lot of you. There's also the Michigan Dogman Triangle. I have to look that up. I'll have to definitely look that up, because it's wild. I mean, again, I've been to the Great Lakes before, not in the winter, but it's wild to me because I'm used to lakes being small because we live by the coast. So the ocean is what's big. The ocean is what's wild. The Atlantic Ocean is, that has got an energy of its own. The Atlantic, it's crazy. The anyway, it's crazy on the Atlantic coast. They have to build houses up on stilts because of the high tide can take out. I mean, it's crazy. That's where my mom's family's from. So to see a lake have the same kind of behavior as an ocean is crazy to me. That's wild to me. The fact that there are sailors on a lake is wild to me. And so we're going to cover a lot of these stories revolving around Lake Michigan. I know that there are, speaking of Dogman, I know there are stories of another type of cryptoid creature that lives in Lake Michigan, that they're on TikTok especially. There are lots of stories of people who have witnessed this type of cryptid creature on Lake Michigan. It also seems like Lake Michigan has their own version of the gray man. I don't know if they call it the gray man, but in listening to some of these Lake Michigan stories, it reminded me of the gray man, which is a story from South Carolina that I've covered on this channel. It's mainly Pawleys Island, which is an island off the coast of South Carolina, around where my mother grew up, or her family is from, rather. And that was the first ghost story I was told when I was a child. We were in South Carolina. We would spend our summers in South Carolina. And I remember sitting in the house and looking at the front porch. And we would always be right on the ocean, and seeing the rocking chairs move in the wind. And I remember my mother saying, "Oh, I wonder if the gray man's going to come." And that's when she told me the story, and my cousins the story of the gray man. So the gray man will go, and for centuries now has gone. You still see him walking down the coast of Pawleys Island. And whenever there's a hurricane, you'll see the gray man. And sometimes he knocks on people's doors and they actually answer the door. And he says, "You need to get out. A hurricane is coming." They've even covered the Gray Man on Unsolved Mysteries before. That great old show, Unsolved Mysteries. They've covered the Gray Man before, and so there does seem to be the same type of entity on Lake Michigan from some of the stuff that I've watched that warns people before, not before weather, but before this cryptid creature comes out of the ocean. And so if I have any people from Michigan that know about this particular like guardian spirit that warns people, I called it the gray man because that's what I know from South Carolina. Let me know, because that's wild to me that it seems like a protector spirit, just like the gray man of South Carolina is a protector spirit. But you guys, that's Stephen Kubacki. Again, we're going to get more into Lake Michigan and more Mystery Mondays. Again, if you are from Michigan or Wisconsin or any of the Ohio, any of that area around the Great Lakes or up in Canada, and there is something that you want me to know or you want me to cover, please, please, please either comment it down below or send me an email at esotericatlanta@gmail.com. If you have your own experiences and you want to come on and tell your story, you're welcome to do that as well. I'd love to have you come on. If you're nervous about that and you want to hide your name and not show your face, that can also be arranged. So don't worry about that. I'm really funny about that. If you don't want to be doxxed, I'm not going to dox you. So that's the story of Stephen Kubacki. Now, so if you're watching the replay and you're not interested in channel news, you just wanted to watch that story, you can sign off now. But for my people here on the Esoteric Atlanta community, just some news about this upcoming week. Something I've been working on for a while now. I've kind of kept it quiet. I'm going to actually be in a documentary this week. We're going to be filming this week for a documentary. And I'm very excited. And it's over some topics that we've covered here on this channel before. But because it's going to be it's not going to be on YouTube. It's an actual documentary. I am going to be spending most of this week preparing before it. This is not the first documentary I've done, but anytime I go onto somebody else's channel or anytime I am a guest on a documentary, I always want to make sure I have my A game for my channel, but I really want to make sure I have my A game for somebody else's channel or somebody else's documentary. That's important to me, that I am very integral with my work, especially when it's on somebody else's platform. And so I'm going to be in a documentary. We're going to be, again, filming this week, my part this week. And usually what happens is that you film for a long time over the subject that you're talking about. They do like hours of filming with you. And then when the documentary is produced, there might only be 15 minutes of you talking, and it gets interwoven with other people who are also in the documentary. And I do know one other person that's in the documentary. I'm not going to say who. You guys will see. I'll let you know as soon as it's out. But so that's happening this week. So that's kind of my priority this week, is just making sure that I have everything professionally taken care of for this particular production company. The producers that I've spoken to are incredibly nice and incredibly understandable, and they're very flexible, and I've really had a good experience. With that being said, I want to let you guys know too, I had this issue before when I did the Jesus strand. So one thing I want to remind everybody watching is that anytime you were on a documentary and it's not your own, you're not in charge of it. You're not producing it. You're not editing it. And you don't know, most of the time, you don't know the other participants, nor do you know what the other participants are saying with their research. So I just want to go ahead and clarify that, because this happened with the Jesus Strand. I'm only responsible for my research. And I don't know. I know one other person in it. He's incredible. You guys know him too. You'll see when the documentary is out. But everybody else in the documentary, I don't know. And I don't know what they're going to be saying or what their research is going to say. And so this really was hard with the Jesus Strand. I got a lot of threats. I got a lot of heat because of other people's parts in the documentary. And I thought that was common sense. Like, I thought people would have figured that out, just critical thinking skills, that when you do a documentary, you don't know the other people in the documentary, nor do you know what their research is. That's not your business. The producers don't tell you that, right? They just ask you to fill a particular point of view from a particular point of reference and research. For the Jesus strand, that was the missing books of the Bible for me. Most of the stuff in the Jesus strand, I absolutely do not agree with. My research, I stand behind. But again, that's not my place, is to direct a documentary or to, censor other people. No. And that's what a documentary is. It's documentation. It's taking documentation from all these researchers. So I just want to go ahead and clarify that for people. I don't know who the other participants are, nor do I know what they're going to say. And that is frankly none of my business because I'm not the one producing it. All right. So we're not going to go down the same road we went down with the Jesus strand, where all of a sudden, just because I was in a documentary, I am now responsible for everybody else's words and actions and research. That is stupid. That shows ignorance and low intelligence and low IQ on other people's part when they want to project that onto other people. Okay. So we're just going to get that out of the way right now. Anyway, I will let you guys know once it's done. I will let you guys know when it gets released, when they're done editing it and producing it. And once it's ready to be shown, I will totally let you guys know. And I'm glad to be of service with this. Is an important documentary, and I'm really glad to be of service. With that being said, again, so this week's going to look a little weird when it comes to shows because that's my main priority. But after Friday, I should be totally done with my part of the documentary. So I'll be able to get back to normal with you guys. With that being said, though, please make sure that you guys are subscribed to Todd over on the Confused Wanderer. He is going to be dropping a episode. He might have already dropped it. I don't know. He's going to be dropping an episode today, exposing the Cassiopeian cult part 1 over on the Confused Wanderer. I'm in it with him. He was very funny. He asked me if I would do these videos with him because it's easier for him to banter with somebody else than just doing his research. And especially with something as crazy as Laura Knight and her shenanigans. Now, I will be dropping a copy of that episode on my channel on Wednesday, the 22nd, but I'm going to let him drop it first. I think we're going to do one more episode, a part 2, where we're going to go even into more stuff about it. So, yeah, Linda, he is a really good teacher. Todd is really, he's really good with his words. And so I'm glad you're loving listening to him. Make sure he's going to drop that video today, and it's good. It's juicy. It's juicy. He found some really juicy stuff. And so that, again, I will drop my copy on Wednesday. I'm also going to be on Catherine Edwards' channel on Thursday for our coffee chat. It's her turn this week. And then again, there probably won't be anything Friday through Sunday just because I'll be finishing up with the documentary. And then there might be a Monday mystery next week. It depends on how quickly we get done with the documentary for me to prepare a show for Monday. But I just want you guys to be aware of that. I haven't forgotten about you. There's just a lot going on behind the scenes, and I've kept it quiet for a while. But now that we've got filming everything signed, sealed, and delivered, I can just go ahead and tell you guys that that's what's going on. So anyway, I thank you guys so much for being here. Hopefully we'll get better at these lives. I do want to start doing the Monday mysteries as lives, as I said in the beginning. So once again, let me know in the comment section what time works better for you. Tell me in East Coast times. I know I have people from all over the world. So if you tell me like 10 o'clock and I don't know what time zone you're in, that doesn't really help me. So let me know East Coast times. And we can start to work the lives better. And the more I get to learn this software better about showing, citing my research so you guys can see. And that helps because of the AI situation. Again, they're listening to our research, our deep dives on our edited videos, and then they're regurgitating it and shadow banning us. And so this helps me with that. So I don't have to go through the editing process if AI is just going to come and collect it anyway. So so hopefully this works better for you guys, and we'll get even better at doing lives. Practice makes perfect. So hopefully we'll get, okay, Lisa, cool. 11 a.m. like I did today. Perfect. Hopefully we'll just get better at this. So I thank you guys so much. We hit about an hour. I could sit here and talk to you guys all day. Honestly, like I before I signed on, I was like, oh, I really want to talk about Gypsy Rose as well. But I actually have to pull out here in a second because I got to go prep things for the documentary. So thank you guys so much. Again, make sure you are subscribed to Midwest Night Watchers. and Todd, and everything will be in the description box below. I thank you guys, and I will see you guys very, very soon. Bye, everybody.